Hey, hey.
How are you doing? It's wonderful to be here. I'm super excited. I can't wait to chat with you about something that both of us are actually rather passionate about, which is podcasting.
I know. One of the things that's so funny is I feel like I just kind of fell into podcasting by accident. I can't say I was like, oh, I want to be a podcaster. I just, ended up on someone's podcast and it was like, oh, this looks like something I can do. And it's like, oh, let me try it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're pretty darn good at it too. So
Well,
that
thank
worked out very
you.
well. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope it's, entertaining, trying to be lively, all of the things, right? All the things we aspire to do.
Yes. So speaking of things we aspire to do, while we're waiting for people to join on, if you don't mind, I'm going to put something on the screen here. So share screen. Okay, don't show these tips again. Which screen? This is it. All right, everybody. So here's the thing. What I want you to be able to do is I want you to scan this QR code. All right. So just use your phone since we're all going to be, just kind of hanging out on here for a few minutes. If you don't mind, go ahead and scan this. And when you scan this, what this is going to give you the opportunity to do is to take a very short form assessment. And this assessment is going to talk to you a little bit about how you can get a better baseline of where you are in the world of being influential. So Dana, do you mind if I just leave that up while we get started and kind of chat for a few minutes? And
No,
hopefully
absolutely.
some people can do that. And I've got this really cool thing. So we have this great team. And Jessica and Isabel have been working on this, but on my screen over here on this side over here, I'm actually going to see those of you who are taking this assessment. So scan it with your phone and then take the assessment. I'm going to see the live results over here. And then Dana, at the end, depending on how many people we get, I would be more than happy to share the actual cool stuff that's there. So I wonder, can I post that as a comment? Do you know?
Yeah, I think you can. You should be able to post it in the comment section and people can see it. So that'd be cool to kind of see the results.
Yeah. I did this for the first time a little while ago. So I was at an RIA conference and there's probably 20 people in the room and like 17 people took the assessment and they're like, wow, those were really good questions. I'm like, yeah, I know those are good questions. I got a really smart team. So I'll try to figure out how I can put that in the chat. But all right, well, let's get started. So what are we chatting about today? What are we trying to get across?
All things podcasting, right? I feel like the biggest thing is kind of also getting through the fear of being, kind of live and sharing your voice and figuring out, well, what is my authentic self, and trying to figure all of that out in addition to just trying to figure out what equipment to use. I feel like there's so many different parts of podcasting and just speaking in general. So maybe we should start there because it's even interesting too. So I'm traveling and I had to be mindful, and I'll kind of show this, to bring my own microphone from home. And I'm kind of getting used to a different setup. So that's also real life, right?
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll parse some stuff out, and then whatever questions that you have, please just interrupt me if I get too philosophical here. But the first thing, step number one, if any of you are interested in podcasting, the first thing that you have to do is figure out who in God's name you're podcasting to, right? I think that's, Dana, one of the biggest issues that a lot of people say, well, I'm just going to talk to everybody. That's not how podcasting works. In fact, that's not how good marketing works, but that's a totally different conversation. And so, anyway, so who is your ideal target market? Who do you want to communicate with? Now, with, not to. Podcasting, great social media content is supposed to begin a conversation. It's not you talking at people. It's you having conversations with people. There's lots of great tips, tricks, and techniques to be able to make that happen. Now, you have a great microphone. Both of us do this a lot. I have a heck of a system here. But honestly, you can get started by just using this. So I know this tangled mess, right?
Man, Matt, does that have wires?
Yeah, I know. Do you believe it? These are old school, right?
Like, what is? I almost had to look. I'm like, what is this thing with wires attached to it?
So
yes, we still have those, right? We can still utilize.
Almost everybody does, right? Because at one point they gave these to you when you got a phone, right?
Right.
If you watch like the super TikTokers or people who do Instagram Reels, almost all of them are still using this microphone. This microphone is high enough quality where you can get a like good enough sound where you can start your podcast with just using that. So I don't want people to overthink it. One of my favorite stories, Dana, is an advisor called me up and they're like, I'm so ready. I'm like, all right, what are you ready for? I'm so ready to start podcasting. I'm like, holy crap, you're really ready. That's awesome. Yeah, I bought a $5,000 recording studio. And I was like, I don't even have a $5,000 recording studio.
I think ready went to a whole nother level with the $5,000 podcast studio.
They did go a little bit, but advisors, of course, you know this, they never do that, right? They never overbuy, they never overspend. But so figure out who you're talking to, and then you need to start talking. My last tip is you have to have a plan. Most of the people who are listening to this, most of the people who are involved with Chip are actually planners, right? They're financial planners, and your podcast and your marketing should also be planned also. So here's what I'd like for everybody to do. It's just to grab a piece of paper and write 1 to 12 down the side with a space in between each one of the 12s. So you actually have 24 little areas on a piece of paper. You can use a spreadsheet, whatever feels comfortable for you. That's what you should do. Now, you're going to write down the top 12 questions that you find yourself answering all the time. Discovery meetings, client meetings, out and about, centers of influence. And then under that, I want you to write 3 sub points underneath those. So let's say it's RMDs, right? Inflation, whatever you're hearing right now. And then underneath that, put 3 bullet points. What you've just done there is actually created a legitimate content calendar. You've created, if you have 3 sub points, so that would be 4. So it's 48 pieces of content in that simple exercise. And that can also be the foundation for your podcast.
Right. And it's like, how simple is that, right? It's so, we tend to get in a space where we're constantly overthinking how we need to run it, but it also does to some degree need to function as a business, right? As kind of an extension of who we are and our brand and how we really want to define that. And kind of going back to the headphones, because I do agree that the wireless ones probably work a lot better, because although with the fancy, the wired ones, also with the fancy wireless headphones, sometimes they don't connect well, right? You kind of get a little bit of that feedback with that. So you want to make sure whatever you're using, you're comfortable, your listeners are comfortable, and the person that you're talking to is comfortable as well. But I think you bring up a lot of great points around having structure and strategy. So let's talk a little bit more about that, right? How do you actually go about developing that plan? And when you're ready to do your podcast, do you practice? Like, should people be practicing?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So here's the thing. And you know this because you're a professional speaker, right? And so you got to warm up, everybody. This is a show. So this is the second recording that I've done today, third recording I've done today. I totally warmed up for this. I've got a guitar that's sitting over there. I did some vocal warm up.
You did a lot better than me.
Yeah, I have my water here. I drank some tea with some honey. I mean, seriously, guys, this is a show, and jazz hands and all, you need to be ready. It's the playoffs right now in the NBA, and those are professional basketball players. They're still shooting. They're still practicing. They're stretching. They're warming up. The more you prepare for your show, the better off you're going to be, which means that you need to practice. Take your phone and record your voice and listen to yourself. Take notes. What are your go-to words? Are you speaking really quickly? Are you speaking too slowly? Are you speaking in a monotone manner? How is your voice inflection? Do you sound interesting? Do you sound boring? Seriously, grade yourself. And you know what? Here's the best thing. If you don't know, find a 13-year-old kid and say, I want you to listen to this and tell me what you think. And I'll tell you.
They will tell you the truth. Even the younger ones. It's just like, no, I don't like that.
Yeah. Mommy, you sound boring. Oh God, here we go. Right. So that's those little tests, those little tips and tricks. I don't think a lot of people talk about that, but it's really powerful. It can be a wonderful, wonderful way for you to feel more confident, because what happens a lot of times is when the numbers don't meet your expectations, Dana, you kind of poop out, right? If you're if you realize that it's going to take you a while, this is a 24-month marketing idea, right? Starting a show, this is not something that you're going to get a new client in 30 days. That's just not how this game works. So practice, practice, practice. Listen to yourself. We use talking points. We don't use scripts. That'll still, by the way, get passed by compliance pretty quickly because there's new rules about that not all of the broker dealers are up on, but the RIAs are. But yeah, just get started.
Oh yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing is not getting in our own way to get started. And even possibly, what are your thoughts around having maybe even a focus group, right? We have a focus group or we have accountability groups for everything else. What if we kind of have that when you go to test out your podcast? I mean, that was something that I was thinking about earlier. I can't say that I actually stuck to that and did that. I kind of just threw caution to the wind. And when I started, it was more of a fun project for me to see where it was going. And then I realized I really enjoyed it. And this was something that I wanted to keep going. But I think when you're really focused around how you're building your business, how you're building your brand, should you have that focus group to say, hey, what do you think about this podcast? How does it make you feel? To the same degree that you would test that out with a child per se, but also maybe your potential audience.
I have a really good friend of mine. His name is Stephen Wershing. And his area of brilliance is advisory boards. If you don't have those for your practice, that would be the place to start, Dana. I mean, being able to sit down and meet with your best of your best clients who are going to give you real, appropriate, passionate, and caring feedback. That's exactly who you should be bringing this to. Go to them. Hey, you're my advisory board. What do you think I should be talking about? What are the guests that you think I should have on the show? Can you introduce me to those people? What do you want me to ask? They're going to love that level of engagement because most of the time the advisory boards are more like, the onboarding process and prospect, all of the kind of boring things. When you engage your advisory board with stuff that's quantifiable and tangible and that they're actually going to get benefit from. And it also, this is my favorite part, it makes it easier for them to refer business to you because it's so much easier, Dana, so much easier to say, you should listen to his podcast or her podcast. She has a great show. Oh my God, my advisor was just talking about that. She was just talking about how important, Social Security, when you take Social Security, did you know there's 395 kabillion? I don't know. There's so many of them. I don't remember. Different ways to take Social Security. She just did a podcast on that. That's opt-in marketing. That's how you can build a relationship with people without, one, you ever know it. And two, all of a sudden you get calls. And this happens to our clients frequently. I was listening to your show and I heard you say this. I would like to talk to you about that. I think that's pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That practice, that showcasing, really showing your expertise. Now, the one thing, of course, within focused around financial advisory in our industry and financial services is that, it's not always fun and sexy and warm to talk about, a lot of the jargon and the things that go with it. So how do people really transition, a lot of, serious topics into things that are fun, right? Are exciting, do put inflection points in their voices. So it's not just mundane and, oh my God, we're stretching out and we're talking about, wills and trust. And here's someone, here's another podcast about that. But how do you really set yourself up to say, hey, this is going to be the most exciting thing you ever listen to. And it's about, whatever's going on in the market today.
Sure. So Ernest Hemingway said, if I'm not crying when I'm writing it, they're not crying when they're reading it. And I bring that up to every one of my guests because if they want people to be excited and engaged, they have to be exciting and engaging. So we have something called the perfect podcast formula. It's storytelling, education, entertainment, call to action. You have to infuse your podcast with stories. Now, the way that we do it here at ProudMouth is a little different than other companies because what we want you to do is we want it to be an interview/conversation, right? So my favorite example is Oprah. That's my favorite. First off, she's the best interviewer.
It is what it is, right? Everyone gets a car on here. Not on here today. We're just joking.
Can't hold us to that. So one of the great things so the show was called Oprah. Oprah rarely talked about herself. right? But what Oprah did was Oprah made that guest feel so special, so important just by being on the show. The show shouldn't always be the Dana Wilson show, right?
Mm-hmm.
What it should be is, I am Dana Wilson. I'm bringing you this unbelievably person who's going to make your life better, smarter, faster, stronger, right? I am the vessel in which that conversation happens. Now, we do it on the flip side too. So I will have my team interview. So we have professional voice talents who will interview Dana and who will get Dana's brilliance out of her. But that is the best possible way to do this. We know that that works incredibly well. We know that that's very, very powerful. And it also reduces a lot of pressure, because if you show up and ask questions, trust me, it's a lot easier to show up and ask the questions than it is to be on this side of the microphone answering the questions. So did that answer that question?
No, it did. It definitely does. Yeah, it's really relative, right? Because when you're on the opposite side, you're trying to make sure you say all the things right, right? How do I make sure I'm responding in a way that's actually reflective of my brand and my thoughts? Because I think, we're in that day and age where everyone might be scared to start a podcast because they're not necessarily certain what they might say, right? And you might say the wrong thing. And kind of getting past that fear of that. Do you have any steps around getting through that, or how people can kind of make sure they're sort of staying on script without sounding like they're on script?
Yeah.
Which is probably a challenge.
Yeah. Well, the staying on script is way more difficult because advisors chase rabbits. It's kind of one of the reasons why we have a co-host system. But here's the most important thing in the world. Now, you and I are doing this live right now. All right. Most podcasts, 99% of them aren't live. So when we're doing audio only podcasts, which is the majority of what we do here at ProudMouth, one of the things that we say right out of the gate is it's not live. So if you say something and you don't like how it sounds, all you have to do is say stop. My post-production team will take that out and just start over, right? I love that. That's the flexibility of podcasts. Video is not as forgiving, right? If I totally flubbed this, you're not going to edit out 4 minutes of Matt flubbing something, right? But on a podcast, we can take care
we
of
keep that in for the comic relief. That just stays.
It's funny that you say that. So Kirk and I were on a show a little while ago, and his fire alarm went off. And I was like, we're both sitting there like, do you hear that? And he's like, do you hear that? And I was like, and we're still doing the show. And he's like, oh my God, my fire alarm. And so he, disappeared. And then he came back. And he's like, yeah, we burnt some toast. We left that in the show because we just thought it was very real, right? Because life happens and it's important to have that. Now, there are some people who that is a seventh circle of Dante's hell. They wouldn't ever want to keep that in there. But post-production is really important. I believe, Dana, that really helps with people's confidence.
Yeah, I do too. I also think it just makes it, it adds to the fun and the realness of it. It reminds people that, you're human and you're not just this professional showing up in this very suited manner here to kind of teach them something, going back to what we were talking about earlier about showing up and being authentic and kind of letting people in the room, and in the room comes with noise and it comes with things falling and it comes with stuff going off. And, that's just kind of a part of life to some degree, but also wanting to, put that in its place, depending upon what you're trying to get across or how much you want to show up or not show up. So with that, like, how vulnerable do you think people should be within their podcast, right? How much of them should they have show up, even when they're trying to toe that, very professional line to attract, new clients, but then also engage more with other clients that they might have already?
Oscar Wilde said, you might as well be yourself because everyone else is taken.
So I hope everyone is taking a clear list of the quotes because they're very important. And I like that you do that.
Well, I'm not.
They're very relative.
So I steal from super smart people, right? But I believe you should just be yourself. And so here's the problem. Canned content. So this is going to sound like a weird tangent, but I promise it'll come back. So when you use other people's content and other people's voices, that is what you're building a relationship with. You're building a relationship with somebody else's thought leadership and things like that. So when they come in and the article doesn't sound like you, they know you didn't write it, and you lose influence and you lose credibility. Our goal is to build influence and to build credibility. So I want you to be as real as possible. We have one of our first podcasting clients had a stutter. All right. And he had spent years and years and years in his life working on his stutter. And you really couldn't tell until he got a little nervous, and then it would come back, which is very normal for people who have a stuttering problem. And we wouldn't take it out. Because if you sat down and met with him and you thought that this person spoke perfectly all the time, and then all of a sudden that person started stuttering, you don't know that person. So I want you to be genuine. I want you to be authentic. We want you to be your own loud, not somebody else's loud. Stop trying to be somebody else. It's ridiculous. It's exhausting. And people want the genuine you. That's the big change in social media. Right. The people who are real and authentic, who aren't using all the filters on Instagram, right? Those are the people who are going to get more and more followers, right? Those are the people connect with. It's the kind of fake component of social media that I just, throw the flag of BS, and it's terrible, right? I want you to be real. I want you to be authentic. There's two people who just popped on, Dane. I just have to highlight two people. I don't know if you know who Marcy Bear is. Marcy is an unbelievable human being, an amazing advisor, and she's got an amazing podcast. And one of the reasons why her podcast is so amazing is because it's Marcy. Well, no, I mean, she also has her business partner. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to downplay him at all. But I just absolutely
give her all the credit. Marcy, we're giving you all the credit today.
Yeah, he's not on this darn thing, so it's all going to me. And then the other one is Kina Pettijohn. So Kina, if you guys don't know Kina, she's an absolute thought leader in our industry. She is a change maker. Her experience is unbelievable and really quite unmatched. And she's herself, right? When you meet with Kina, you get the genuine human being that she is. And that's one of the reasons why she is so influential. Dana, when you and I first met, I remember, there's a lot I remember about you, but my favorite thing that I remember about you is your smile, right? Is your smile is so infectious, and you have this level of joy in your eyes when you're talking about something that you're passionate about, because you're you, and you've given yourself permission to have that confidence in yourself. And here's the deal, everybody, just kind of wrap this kind of tirade up. It changes. You're going to have different levels of you that are socially acceptable in different situations. That's the game we have to play in society. So I'm not saying that you have to be 100% no holds barred on your podcast, but it needs to be the essence of you. That's what's important.
No, I love that. I really do, because I feel like sometimes, we're afraid to be our full selves. We're afraid to bring everything into a lot of stuff that we're doing with our clients when we're, engaging in networking events, and then even, bringing that level of authenticity and vulnerability to our podcast or to any other outlets that we're using. It takes a big step, and some people are a lot more confident in that space. And some people are kind of getting a lot more comfortable just, saying a few things, that kind of make them unique. And I think that's so important, to allow people to have that space and know that you should be showing up in who you are. And that's, the best thing that you can really do is bring in that joy and that smile. And I appreciate the compliment, Matt.
Yeah. You have a radiance about you that I think is unmatched. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are attracted to you and your thought leadership, is because they know that it's you, they're getting you, and there aren't any pretenses. I brought this assessment back up on just for two reasons. Number one, we're about halfway into this, and I just want to give everybody else the opportunity. Everybody just take a picture of this. It's a QR code. You just go ahead and scan it. You don't have to have a QR app. Just take a picture of it. Click on the link that shows up. Take this quick assessment. We're actually getting some scores in now. I'll talk about it at the end. But Timothy asked a question. Dana, do you mind if I answer this? Did you see that?
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was going to say we can get to some of these questions in here. Okay. We got some good questions.
Well, so I'll start with Tim, and then I'll turn it back over to you. But so, is it a good idea to start with live video and edit to an audio podcast? I'm going to say no. Most of you aren't trained on video, and you have to have video training. And there's some people out there who can really, really help you. Idea Decanter is amazing. Katie Braden's unbelievable. They all have courses and can help you get great behind the camera. The other thing is videos are meant to be short. Right. So unless there's a massively interactive component of it, you want your videos to be 3 minutes or less. And that's really what the data shows. After 3 minutes, there's a huge drop off. Podcasting is supposed to be 27 minutes. I think you should start there. You can use some video snippets, which is very powerful. And there's some great programs out there that you can help with that. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that you should start video right out of the gate. And the other thing too is, as I had shown you before with my thing that Dana was giving me crap about all the chords, right? You start with this.
No, but you got to do what works. They work.
They work. You start with this, and that's how you can start a podcast. If you want to do video, you should see my setup here.
But you know what's funny, and the reason I'm laughing is because I did the total opposite. Is I jumped out there and started a video. I started the video podcast and then transitioned into audio. But this was not my space of expertise. For me, it was like, let me just, get on here and have conversations with my friends. And for me, it just, happened to be video. And the reason that I transitioned was due to like timing and frequency and being able to keep up with it better, as opposed to trying to stick to a specific schedule and time. For video, I found the audio part of it a little bit easier, but yeah, I do agree with the expert hat tipping over here to Matt with doing it the reverse and really, I guess, deciding like what you're trying to do. If you do really want to do video, I think understanding like what you're trying to build into that and where you're trying to go with that and why you're doing video as opposed to the audio. But don't necessarily listen to what I did.
Well, here's the
but it was fun for me. I enjoyed it, and I'll probably be kind of going back to a little bit of both. But this has been with like a little bit of practice.
Well, you don't. One, it doesn't have to be perfect, and two, what's important is start, man. Right? You started. You put yourself out there, and because you did that, look what happened, right? You got all of this amazing feedback. You got all of these great followers. You can be fluid. Hey guys, we shoot video all the time here at ProudMouth, all the time. We're a podcasting company. We shoot video, right? It's because, and I believe this. So I think marketing has fundamentally changed. You have to market to your ideal client prospect in the media they prefer while they're there with organic content. It's not an either or anymore. It's an and. You have to have social media. You should have video. You should have audio, right? You should have text-based posts. You'd have quote memes. You should have all of those things because you don't know exactly what your ideal client wants at the time, but you should be ever present and omnipresent for it.
And in that last point too, I think it's important to mention to not make assumptions too, right? Because we think that we know what our ideal client wants to hear or what that ideal audience member wants to hear, but kind of going back to what we talked about earlier about getting to know, not just your voice, but what their voices and what they're wanting to listen to. Because you might have that in your head. It might be completely different, right? So, kind of getting rid of those assumptions. I did see another question down here. Matt, if you can repeat the 4 components of a podcast that you mentioned earlier.
The perfect podcast formula. Yep. So it's entertainment, education, storytelling, call to action. And a lot of you are really good at the first 3, but most of you suck at the last one. You have to have a call to action, everybody. If you put 23 minutes of great thought leadership in front of somebody, it's okay to ask them to do something. And you should ask them to do something. Take the assessment, right? I'm doing calls to action in the middle of this, right? I want you all to take this because you're going to learn about yourself. Subscribe to my podcast, follow me on social media, download my white paper. You have to have a call to action because people are, in fact, there's some great research out there, Dana, that says, mid-roll ads, most people listen to them.
Yep.
Right? Mid-roll, because they're already vested.
I will say that I have gotten a lot of discounts paying a lot more attention to those ads. Now, I have not done a good job of implementing those into my podcast, but moving forward, that is something that I do plan to do. because they are very powerful. And you really do find yourself listening. Like when I'm listening to other podcasts, I'm just like, oh yeah, now I've learned about this, or they've helped me do this, right? I've learned about so many other things, not just from the podcast themselves, but what they're putting into it from a marketing perspective. So I think that's a powerful point that is often missed and is super simple to do. And I like the ones too when people, they have the commercials and they do them in their own voice, right? They kind of create those own characters within what they're doing, which also gives it that flavor, that personality, and people get to see you in a different way. It's like, oh, I didn't know my advisor was funny and they might be good at improv. like, right. Who knew? But those are things that you can kind of throw in as well.
Well, and I think advisors don't give themselves enough credit for their ability to really truly connect with people. Yep. And again, that's why I think you should be entirely authentic. Are there any other questions that came through? I'm sorry, I kind of lost track of.
Let's see here.
Oh, there's a question about YouTube. Where was that? There we go. Andrew, do you guys have any advice on recording the podcast on video for YouTube distribution? What do you think about that?
I think I don't see anything wrong with it if you have a plan to kind of build out your YouTube content. I think just with everything that we talked about today, right? It's all about the strategy. So if it is on YouTube, what are you going to do with it after, right? Is there a plan to, put it on your website? Are you going to showcase it in some way? Because if you're filming it and streaming it on different sites and it's just going there and it's just kind of, dead material, so to speak, then it's just there, right? So what are you actually trying to accomplish with your YouTube channel? How are you going to funnel that back into your overall sales strategy, and what makes sense there for you? So I think YouTube is a great tool if you use it properly, just like anything else, right? How are you funneling that back into what you're trying to do? Is it an educational component that your clients can just go to and you have like this open library where they can, reach out to you, where they don't necessarily have to call you, but you have all these things available for them that's coming from you, right? These video tutorials or whatever you want it to be. So I think it's a great tool. I think it's something that we probably don't use enough in this industry. I also get it might be compliance issues there. But if you can figure it out and get past it, by all means, put that as a part of your arsenal.
Yeah. We solve it in a little different way. So YouTube is the second largest podcast player in the world. Spotify is number one.
I don't think I realized that.
Yeah, man, I heard that, Dan, and it just blew me away because it doesn't make sense to me until it does. And so here's how it made sense to me, right? So a lot of people listen to podcasts while they're at work and it's on their second screen. So they're not watching the video, right? They just have it playing in the background, right? So what we do is instead of having it be the live video of the two people talking or three or four or whatever, what we do is we actually take a static image. This is what most people do on YouTube. They take a static image of the cover art of the podcast and then upload MP4 audio so that you get the SEO boost from YouTube. Now, we also still put in the show notes and a description of the show, any CTAs, any links, backlinks, whatever. That's really important because if you're going to be there, you might as well, just like you just said, use it to your advantage. It needs to be part of your integrated marketing plan. What most advisors do, Dan, this makes me sad, is it's like they think that there's a silver bullet, right? So I was just at a conference last week. I've done 8 now this year. And every time there's a huge producer on stage, one of the things that she'll say is, I have a marketing plan. But then nobody ever asks follow-up questions. I'm like, what? You should ask follow-up. So here are the follow-up questions, right? Well, it's how long is your marketing plan? Most of them will say 24 to 36 months. They'll say, I start something and I will keep doing it for 2 years before I quit. If you look, so like seminars, webinars, educational things at universities, podcasts, video series, networking events, social media, lead funnels, whatever your thing is, you have to give it time. Because if you don't, you're just going to be in fits and starts. And Dana, do you know who hates that more than anybody?
Me.
Yeah. And your team, right?
Oh
Your
yeah.
team hates it. You come back from a
Oh yeah.
conference and Dana, you're all fired up and you're like, hey, we're going to do these 9 things. And your team like, oh, here we go again. Stick with the plan. Here's the thing. Aren't you guys planners, right? Don't you always tell your clients to look at the long term? I don't know if anybody's knows the market's going a little crazy right now.
Planners, yes, in every part of the world and life, maybe not, maybe not so, right? It's like trying to kind of figure it all out at the same time. And I think to some degree, a lot of this is super overwhelming, right? It's trying to figure out, well, how do I just do the simple things, right? How do I make this very simplistic? Because say you have someone who has a solo practice, right? And they're trying to, build it up and do all the things that they know they want to do and, try to integrate this into their business. What can that person do who doesn't necessarily have the team, but they want to do it? And of course they're trying to build up their business, build their practice, like do all the things that, they have to do. What is the bare bones that they can put together?
So I'm just going to give a shameless plug here. I know that you weren't prepared for this. I'm not trying to totally shameless plug, but we built an entire academy for those people because you know what? It's terribly overwhelming. Again, where do I even begin? How do I even know where to begin? And again, this is 2 shameless plugs in a row. So just please don't get upset with me on this.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with the plug, right? Well, we're talking, this is what we're talking about, right?
Right. So take the darn assessment because you don't even know where you are. So you don't know where you need to go, right? So again, use your phone, take a picture on your screen, go ahead and take this assessment. It's going to give you results on what is missing in your influence. So there's number 1. I'll leave that up for a second. But number 2, so Dana, one of the things that we realized, our team realized very quickly is we can't help everybody. Right. So we've got this influence accelerator system. That's our core product and service that we offer, which is, podcasting based, but it's very labor intensive. It's very high touch, high service. And we know a lot of people don't need that or want that, but they do want the education, the foundation. So if you go to podrocketacademy.com, right? So podrocketacademy.com, you can join for free and get we have a course called Podcasting 101. And I'm telling you, it will tell you everything you need to know about starting your own podcast. We've also got some branding things in there, like a brand assessment to see really how great your brand is. Could you imagine being able to just answer some questions and figure out, yeah, my brand's great. My brand's not too good. But you have to figure out where you want to start. You have to be willing to go to where you want to start. That's really important. If you don't want to know where you are, then you are never going to be able to figure out where you're going to go. Right. That was one of the biggest frustrations I always had as a coach was I would meet you where you think you're at instead of where you really are at, which is why we built these assessments. But please go to podrocketacademy.com. It's free to sign up. Free to sign up, free resources out the wazoo. And that should really help answer those questions. But then the last thing is Dana. So you started off doing video, you moved to audio, you do a lot of social media. What do you enjoy?
Oh, I think I just enjoy helping other people tell their stories. I have a love for learning in general, which I can't even believe I'm saying out loud. If my mother heard that, she'd probably laugh. Right? And so would probably a couple of teachers who knew me way back when would probably tell you a completely different story. But I always love just learning more about people, learning more about their stories, who they are, their impact, what really made them who they are. So for, us at Chip, it's really about intentional visibility. And that's why I kind of pour so much into that in our content around the Represented series that we just relaunched which is half fireside chat, half education, and ensuring that the professionals on our platform are seen, are heard, and their stories are told. And they're also seen as the experts that they are in particular fields, right? They know about, different taxation, benefits, whether it's small business planning, all the different things. But for me, that's where I find joy. I find joy in building and storytelling and sharing and ensuring that other people have the space to do that as well. So that's where the fun comes in, right? That's where the magic happens. And I think it pours out when you're doing all of the things that you can do, and you're able to just continuously open that door for other people to just walk through and just share their most authentic self. So it's like when you see that person really getting into it and sharing their story and then being comfortable, because it's a point where we come on, especially when we come on video, and there's always that nervousness. But when you see someone and they're starting to talk about their journey and their passion and all of those things, and that's where I get excited, because that's a sweet spot there, right? That's all you want. That's it for me.
And they light up.
Yeah,
right?
light up. It's
So
unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
And people don't realize that when they're in those moments of like, you're really good. You're really good at that.
And you're really you, which you said very, very well. Somebody had asked me in an interview a while ago, Matt, I don't, why do you love to interview people so much? This is like my favorite thing in the entire world is to actually interview people. Not as much on the other side. I'm way less comfortable here, Dana, than I am on the interview side, or be the interviewer side. But I'm like, I get to ask people questions. I get to connect with people. I get to, make it feel like I'm really making a difference in that moment of time. And if I do my job well as an interviewer, that person comes out. Right. And oh my God, I get to be witness to that. Right. How freaking awesome is that, to be right there in the moment with somebody when that's happening? And I believe that's the power of great content marketing. I believe that if you can be, because here's the deal. The people who are listening to this, a lot of them are marketers. A lot of them are financial advisors, right? And advisors, you experience that behind closed doors all the time. Dana, oh my God, you're sitting down with a client, right? And all of a sudden you ask them a question and then they just light up, or they tell you this amazing story about something. You get to witness that firsthand.
Or they finally start doing the things that you've said them, you told them to do like 50 times, and they just walk in and have it complete. And not just have it complete, but are excited about the completion of whatever that task was. Yeah. And you're right, like those moments of joy you have over and over again, but it's, hard that we don't bring that same joy to ourselves and realize the joy that we have in those moments, and also allow ourselves to have that reflected on screen or through our voice. That's all important too.
People love to watch. Look at, I'm going to use dogs. I don't think we deserve dogs, just to be brutally honest.
I know. Oh my goodness.
When you see a dog who is absolutely doing something that they love, it is unfettered joy, right? You see a musician, a singer, an artist when they're doing their work, there is a level of joy. Those are all professionals. You are in the same category as a financial advisor. There is no difference between Dana Wilson and a professional basketball player. There's no difference between you and artist hanging in the Louvre. There is no difference between you and a rock star. You are as much of a professional as they are. Find your joy in what you're doing and try to live that as much as possible. But here's the reality. There's some parts of our job that suck, and we have to understand that there has to be some contrast.
Oh yeah. But balancing the joy with the reality.
Yeah. Ooh, look at this question. Did you just see this coming?
Yeah. What's the best way to disrupt your industry? Oh man. I think the best way to disrupt your industry is just to take hold of a mission that you want to see exist, right? Taking hold of a change that not everyone is necessarily paying attention to, or may just not find as important as you. I think that when you're deepening and you're looking for your voice, it's kind of the same thing as ending up, being a disruptor, and not a disruptor in the sense of like you're there to just tear everything apart, but you're there to equally motivate, equally empower, to do some really big, impactful work and mission that is so much larger than you, that you even expect that you step into. I mean, I did not expect for this to be my lane, to drive into inclusion, or to have Dana Disrupts, it just kind of organically happen. And I think that's the best way that disruption happens, when it kind of sneaks up on you and you cannot shake it. And you just feel like, oh, I have this, like there's something inside me that needs to exist, and either I'm going to build it or I'm going to continuously share it with others. And I think that's the best way to technically disrupt, or to create that space for other people to do the disruption, right? It's kind of goes hand in hand. So, that's the biggest thing, is finding that passion, that why, being very open and empathetic and listening, and making sure that, hey, if you're seeing something, you want that change. And then it's also about putting those actionable steps forward to figure out how you utilize your voice, and your power to make that change happen, right? And a lot of it is going to come from you leaning on other people to do so, because you're not going to walk in that disruptive path by yourself, and nor should you. So it's about making sure that you have those partners, those people that are also going to champion you, but you're also equally championing each other. So that's how I think that you do it.
You said something there that I really want to just tease out a little bit, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
The greatest disruptors are the ones who listen. The greatest disruptors aren't the ones who are just screaming at the top of their lungs.
Absolutely.
My grandmother said something to me. It's really funny. I attribute all of these to my grandmother. I have no idea.
I do as well. You're in good company.
So my grandmother said to me, Matt, you never learn anything while talking. She told me this when I was like 7 too, right? I mean, my grandma was.
It's a hard thing to unpack. Boy, listen, we all like to talk, but when you have to sit still, that's another level of it's another level of life.
But if you do that, then when you're trying to be disruptive, you're going to be disruptive in the things that people want disrupted, because because you listened, right? I love that. That's just so powerful. And you said that you have to listen, right? You can't just be screaming at the top of your lungs, because people are really tired of that, right? They don't want somebody to ask a question and then immediately answer the question. They want somebody to ask a question, shut up, listen to your answer, process your answer, not listen to respond, but listen to listen. Dana, I honestly I think the world would be a much better place if people would listen to listen instead of listen to respond. I know that's very, very simplistic, and there are a lot of problems in the world, but I think a lot of times it's just because we don't listen. And when you're creating content, showing your audience you're listening is how you're going to make the greatest impact, right? So if you write, and because you do this all the time, you write really thought-provoking things. And if you follow Dana on social, what you'll see is there will be communication, right? There will be actual conversation that happens after the main point, because Dana wants to know that she's listening. That's one of the great things about social media, is that it's supposed to be a two-way street. And that's what makes great content. By the way, Timothy just said that was a great answer. So it was, right? That was wildly passionate. And that's one of the things that so many of you are afraid to let that passion out. And I think that that's when you truly become a disruptor. You listen, and then you be passionate about what you're hearing. That's the game changer.
Oh yeah. And it's a skill set, right? And then don't get me wrong, it's nothing that I've totally mastered, right? We're all a continuous work in progress. But I think that's it right there, is like being okay with being a work in progress, because we all want to hop out there and do things out of perfection. And had that been the case when I even tried to start this podcast or video series that I was doing, which still is the included series, I would have never started. It would still be some thought in my mind swirling around there, but it was more of like let's just see what happens. Let's have fun with it, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're not bringing any fun and joy to it, you don't want to do it. Oh, that rhyme, that was probably really corny. That was too much of a rhyme there. But it's true, right? It's like, if there's no joy, like, what is the point? You know, if you're not
Yeah.
having fun with it, if you can't have fun with your guests, if you can't have fun or laugh at yourself, like, you know, what are we really doing it for? And I think you have to kind of be okay with it not being so perfect. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to not get things right the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, right? You know, give yourself some grace to just learn and continue and to grow in the moment, because the more you do it, the better you'll get, right? The better listener you'll become as you know, have more conversations, you do more interviews, and the more you'll also start to build that confidence in yourself, right? That also equates to you then being on bigger stages and really sharing your mission, your vision, your values with the world. So, you know, keep all that in mind. That was probably a mouthful, but I hope that was, you know, helpful.
One other thing that I want to, and we haven't really talked about this from
Mm-hmm.
a podcasting perspective, but guests. So I'm sorry,
Oh
you
yeah.
triggered something, and I'm like, you know what? I think we should probably talk. We don't have a lot of time left. So your guests should be representative of your ideal client base, but also of the
Mm-hmm.
world. I mean,
Yep.
you know, um, I want our guests to be as diverse as possible. I want it to be as inclusive as possible, because here's the deal. I get to learn more. I mean, I know that sounds terribly
Mm-hmm.
selfish, and I know that sounds very self-centered, and it's hard for me not to be that way, because I just love that so much. Like, when I have the opportunity to meet somebody whose life experience is so different than me as a cis white man, I want to know, and I want to learn, and I want my audience to learn. When you start doing that with your content, that's when things really become, it's like jazz, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm old, and I don't know how many people listen to jazz anymore. But if you've
No,
ever,
jazz is still cool. It's
okay,
okay.
good. All right, thank you. I
We,
appreciate
we
it.
got you.
That really, that makes me feel good. I appreciate it. But if you've ever seen a live jazz show, which very few of you probably have, because they don't really have a lot of them out there, because you always hear like jazz albums, right? And they're just killing it, right? But what happens is, if just one person is off, right? If the drummer just misses a beat, or the bassist is in the wrong key, everything falls apart. But when
Mhm.
they're all humming together, which is really what great content does, but you have to have different instruments. A jazz band can't just be all trumpets, right? It's got to have other things there. And when other things are there, beautiful music happens. And that's why I think Chip is so important. I think what you're doing is so important. And I think that why we as an industry have failed miserably and abysmally to try to make it so that anything looks anything representative of our population. I go to conferences a lot, and it's the same old thing on stage. I go to conferences a lot, and the people who are there are the same old, right? Why aren't we trying to make things better? Why aren't we trying to make things more representative? Because if you just stay in that lane, you don't learn crap, right?
Mhm.
Just come on, get out there, interview people who make you uncomfortable. Oh, I had somebody who came on our show once, Dana. Man, by the way, she swore more than I've ever sworn in my entire life within 30 minutes, man.
Now that's authenticity, right? To the
Right. Well,
fullest.
and yeah, and I was not ready for it. And she made me
Mhm.
terribly uncomfortable with a couple of things that she said. So I had to check in with myself. I was
Mhm.
open and honest. And I said, hey, look, wow, I've never had anybody say anything like that on the show. I need you to unpack that a little bit more, because I feel like I don't know. I don't get it. And so she unpacked it. And all of a sudden, she became more real. And all of us had this shared learning experience. I think that that's something that people really need to pay attention to. And they don't, they want to stay in their little comfort zone. But
Mhm.
if you're truly going to create great content, if you're going to be a great podcaster, if you're going to be great on video, if you're going to be a great human being, you have to be more diverse. You have to be more inclusive. You have to interview people. You have to get out of your comfort zone. And it's okay to show that you're uncomfortable. You don't have to be stoic, right? You
Mhm.
can be like, holy crap, I've never experienced any of that ever in my entire life. And thank you for at least allowing me to have a brief, better understanding of that situation. Anyway, what do you think about that? I don't know if that was
No, I think that's completely true, especially that last part, right? About, you know, being able to say live, or, you know, when you're talking to someone that, hey, I don't know about that. Can you please tell me, you know, tell me more and tell our, you know, audience more. And that's okay to do, right? It's kind of like, you know, when you're sitting down with a client and they ask you a question, and you're stumped, right? You don't know the answer, and you definitely don't want to make up an answer, right? Because that's absolutely going to come back to haunt you. You want to be okay with saying, hey, I'm not sure about that, but give me some time and let me get back to you, right? It's the same thing that you can do in that moment, and also bringing that back to the podcast and saying, hey, like, I don't know that I understand it. If I don't understand, my audience might not either. So can you just unpack that? Let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's make sure that we're bringing clarity to what you're trying to get across, so that people can understand, and that way they can hopefully follow you, or whatever the case is. So yeah, I think that's equally important. And I wanted to make sure we get to this question before we hop off too. So Greg has a question about getting in front of business owners and how to engage them better with content. He's saying that can be very challenging. Do you have any advice for getting their attention and getting them to show up? Because obviously, as business owners, they're busy, right? So how do you get their attention?
So we don't generally have a huge problem getting people to be guests on our show, because how I position it is very, very clear. Number one, it's going to be a 30-minute commercial about how freaking awesome you are and what you do. Greg, not a lot of people say no to that, man. They just don't. Now, it's a little bit more difficult to get them to engage after they've been on the show. I will totally agree with you on that. But getting them actually to, one, share it with their audience and get on your show. When you say you have a podcast as a financial services professional or as a business owner, and you respect that other business owner so much that you want them on your show, I would say our run rate. So I've probably done 1,000 shows, and I would say I've probably asked 1,050 people to be on the show. And I've had 50 people who've said no out of 1,000.
Wow.
That's a pretty good run rate.
But yeah, right? That is an amazing run rate.
So I'm nobody, right? Nobody knows who the hell I am. But it's how I
would argue that. And I think some of the audience would as well.
I think, but saying, hey, look, I have a show. This is what the show is about. You're a highly respected person within the community. I'd really love to interview you and pick your brain and learn from you. That level of humility that people are like, wow, that makes me feel really good, and I'd love to do that. I think that that's one of the most powerful ways. Now, it also helps to have a good system in place. Again, if you go to the Pod Rocket Academy, we've got tips, tricks, and techniques in there, Greg, that will absolutely help you have the system to make sure that, one, they show up on time, two, that they're prepared, number three, that they're okay on the show, and then number four, that they'll share it with their audience. But it gives you a wonderful opportunity to follow up with them 6 months, 9 months from now. Hey, I was just checking in. Did you get anything from that podcast? Did anybody say anything to you about it? And here's the deal. They're going to say yes. Right. Dana, I get people all the time who come on the Top Advisor Marketing podcast, and they'll email me right after the show goes live. Matt, I got 5 appointments from being on your show. Holy crap. That's great. Good for you. They're like, well, it wouldn't have happened without you. No, wouldn't have happened without you. Right. We're just the purveyor of it. We just want to bring it, bring your thought leadership out. But Greg, I think that's a great way to do it, especially if you can also find common ground. And I'll end with that. I always do a whole bunch of research on my guest before I'm there, and I will always try to find a connection point, something that we share, that we have in common, or something that I'm really actually personally very interested in, so that I can begin the conversation by saying, hey, Dana, I don't know. I don't know anything about this, but you seem to be really interested in A. Why are you interested in that? She's really interested in it. She's going to totally want to talk about it. And then I get a chance to learn. That's a great way to build relationships with them. When they say that they're too busy, that's a load of hooey. I throw the BS flag on that one, because they will make time, especially if it's a 30-minute commercial about how awesome they are.
Exactly. Everyone wants to talk about how awesome they are, or just an opportunity to possibly sell their business or whatever they're doing. And sometimes on the flip side of that, it also can be just making it very easy for someone to, like, to your point, making sure you have all the strategy set up. What do they need to do? The, quick link that they need to hop on to join. The simpler you can also make that process too, can just help people, get them onboarded very quickly. So it's just very simple for them to do, and also maybe for their assistant too. So maybe it's even going back in and saying, hey, like, do you have someone that helps you that I can copy in on all these emails, so that they can also help you stay abreast to what's going on as well. So figuring out, what strategies work for different people and what you're seeing. But And then the one thing I do like to do is kind of always ask like a random question to people that they're not really thinking about, just, it could be anything, like one of those kind of, quick questions, making them think, can be kind of funny and humorous, just so that they, leave something on the table, right, that makes them human and is a reminder of that. So.
A good friend of mine, Matt Ackerman, I know we're running out of time here. He ends every one of his podcasts by asking a question to his guest that his son CJ writes. So Matt will sit down with his son and say,
hilarious.
Yeah, I'm interviewing Dana Wilson. Here's who she is. Here's what she do. What question would you like to ask Dana? And it always just like the guest just lights up, and they have great, I can't, please tell CJ, I really appreciate it. It's a great question. So anyway, I just absolutely love that. And if anybody wants to know the results of the assessment, just message me on LinkedIn, because we're running out of time here. Dana, I don't know if we have a hard stop at the top.
Yeah, I think we're really at time. So thank everyone for just joining and taking part in this podcast or our live conversation here. I hope you got some great information about what to do next and how to do that. And also, again, just remember to show up as your full authentic self. I think that's the most important thing that you can do, not just for you, but also for your audience, your clients, and then anyone else that you interact with. So Matt, always a pleasure to talk to you. Always enjoy it. I'm sure we will do something else before the year is up. So I'm looking forward to that.
As always, thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a wonderful day and take care.